Hey everybody, it's Keegan here. I'm back with another video for you guys, and in today's video I'm bringing you guys another edition of Keegan's movie reviews once again. And today I'm bringing you guys part 2 of the James Bond movie reviews, where I talk about all the James Bond movies. Now, if you haven't seen the first part, I will leave a link to that in the description down below, and it will also be at the end cards at the end of the video. It's not required for you to watch the first video, but it is optional. If you want to watch the first video, you can, but again, it'll be in the description down below. But anyways, let's not waste any more time, and let's get right into it. So at the end of part 1, we ended off with Thunderball, and today we're going to be continuing off with You Only Live Twice from 1967. This one was directed by Lewis Gilbert and was released on June 13th, 1967. So this film came out about a year and a half after the previous film, which came out in '65, and it has Sean Connery as James Bond once again. So yeah, let's just get into the story, and then we'll get into my thoughts on it. So in You Only Live Twice, James Bond is sent to Japan on an assignment to find two missing American astronauts and two Soviet astronauts who were kidnapped. The Americans believed their astronauts were kidnapped by the Soviet Union, and the Soviets believed their astronauts were kidnapped by the Americans. But the British government believes that Spectre is behind it all, and is suspected that one of the aircrafts crash landed in somewhere near Japan. So they sent James Bond down to team up with the Japanese Secret Service and try to find the four missing men and try to stop the Americans and Soviets from potentially going at war with each other, potentially unleashing World War III. Spoiler alert, Spectre is behind it all, and James Bond has to stop Spectre once again. And without giving away too much, that's basically the story of the film in a nutshell. I don't really have a whole lot to say about You Only Live Twice, so we'll get by this one pretty quickly. But this one was pretty good, although it's not one of my favorite Bond movies in the series, but it's still a pretty fun movie. It's got some good action. The special effects are pretty good, and I like a lot of these set designs, especially in the base where the villains are, like the villains' headquarters are, like the set designs look really good in that. And the fighting sequences are pretty good, especially the final battle between James Bond and Blofeld, his arch nemesis. And that was pretty cool. It's a fun James Bond movie. I don't really have a whole lot to say about it, although it's not my favorite, but it's still pretty fun. It might be the movie might be considered a little bit outdated by today's standards, at least in PC culture, I guess, but I'm not really going to get into that in this video. But other than that, it's a pretty fun James Bond movie. Again, not my favorite, but it's still entertaining. Surprisingly, the screenplay for this movie was co-written by Roald Dahl. Yeah, that Roald Dahl, the author of children's novels like Fantastic Mr. Fox, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, and all those books. Yeah, he co-wrote the screenplay for this movie, surprisingly. I think he also co-wrote some of the other Bond movies. I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure he did. But other than that, You Only Live Twice is a fun James Bond movie. It's pretty fun, and Sean Connery's great in it, like always. But yeah, I don't have anything else to add, so I'm giving You Only Live Twice a 7.5 out of 10. Now we move on to one of my favorite movies in the franchise, which is On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This is now the 6th film in the franchise. This film was directed by Peter R. Hunt and was originally released on December 19th, 1969. And for the first time, this would be the first James Bond movie to not have Sean Connery play as Bond, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. And instead, James Bond is played by George Lazenby, and this was also the only film to have George Lazenby play as Bond. Why that? Why, you may ask? But we'll get to more on that in a little bit. But we'll get into also why Sean Connery didn't play as Bond in this one in a bit. But for right now, let's get into the story, and then we'll get into my thoughts on this, in my opinion, underrated James Bond film. On Her Majesty's Secret Service starts off with James Bond saving the life of a young woman named Tracy, played by the late Diana Rigg, from committing suicide at a beach. But he is attacked by two unnamed men, and after he kills the two henchmen that were sent to kill him, the young woman gets away, but he knows that she's okay. But he sees her again in the film, and he meets the father of the young woman he saved, who happens to be a mobster and has information on Blofeld. And Bond is on a mission in Switzerland to stop Spectre and Blofeld from unleashing a virus that could wipe out half of humanity in Switzerland. And the problem is he's trying to go into the big stronghold that Spectre has to take them down while posing as I think he was like a doctor or something he was pretending to be or something. I kind of don't remember, but that's fine. But during the mission, he and Tracy slowly start to fall in love. And it's kind of a love story too, which is a lot different than the other James Bond other James Bond movies, which is an interesting turn, in my opinion at least. And without giving away too much, that's basically the story of the film in a nutshell. Now, when this movie first came out back in '69, this one got a lot of mixed receptions from both critics and fans alike. And some people said this was one of the weaker James Bond films. And I think at the time this one was regarded as the weakest one, but years later it would be recognized as one of the best James Bond films. And I gotta agree, this is definitely one of the best James Bond films in the whole franchise. And I thought George Lazenby did a really good job playing as Bond. And it is a shame he didn't continue playing as Bond after this one. Now, why is that, you may ask? Now, originally, Lazenby was offered a contract to do a total of 7 James Bond movies, and he was signed on to do 6 more James Bond movies after this one. However, his agent at the time suggested that it wouldn't be a very good idea because James Bond would be considered outdated in the rise of the hippie culture that was around back in the late 60s and early 70s. And I think he also said he didn't want to be known as James Bond or something like that, but I'm not exactly sure. There's like 3 different articles I looked up saying that he would regret not taking the contract to do the other James Bond films, and some say he didn't want to be James Bond or something. I don't know, but I guess we'll just say his agent made him not take the chance to do more James Bond films, which is a shame because I thought George Lazenby did a really good job as James Bond. I think he was just as good as James Bond as Sean Connery was. And now we get into why Sean Connery wasn't in this one. Now, Sean Connery originally retired from playing James Bond after You Only Live Twice, and so the role for Bond went to Lazenby. But after Lazenby said he wasn't going to play as James Bond anymore after this movie, James Bond would return for the next film, Diamonds Are Forever, which we will get to shortly. So that's basically why Lazenby only played James Bond for one time, and why Connery wasn't in this one. But all in all, I actually really enjoyed this one. This is one of my favorite films in the franchise, as I said before. And this is also one of the longer James Bond movies too. It's got a runtime of 142 minutes. While not as long as some of the later James Bond films that would be released after it, it is one of the longer ones. Though the longest James Bond movie at the time of this video is No Time to Die. But yeah. But I really enjoyed this one. I really liked the love story element, which I think that was a bit of an experimental thingy, which I thought went pretty well with the story. And Diana Rigg was really good in this movie too. She was really good as the Bond girl Tracy in this film. And Diana Rigg, you might know her from Game of Thrones, and she was in another movie that I talked about a few years ago called Last Night in Soho, which was actually her last film, and then she passed away. Rest in peace. And I really like the music in this one. The action sequences are fun, and I really like the base, like the design of the base where they have it in Switzerland, which looked really cool. And it kind of ends off on a bit of a depressing note. I don't want to spoil it, but if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. But all in all, I really enjoyed On Her Majesty's Secret Service. It's one of the more underrated James Bond films, in my opinion, and is one of my favorite films in the franchise. It's too bad that George Lazenby didn't sign the contract to continue playing as Bond for 6 more movies. I thought he was really good as James Bond, but oh well. But all in all, I really enjoyed this one. So I'm giving On Her Majesty's Secret Service an 8.3 out of 10. Alright, so we finally covered all the James Bond movies from the 60s. Now we start getting into the Bond films from the 70s. And we're starting off with Diamonds Are Forever, directed by Guy Hamilton, who previously directed Goldfinger. And this one was originally released on December 17th, 1971. This would have Sean Connery back as James Bond for the final time. Or, unless you count Never Say Never Again as the last James Bond movie with Sean Connery, that one's not actually part of the official James Bond movies. So this one is technically the last James Bond movie to have Sean Connery in it. So yeah, let's get right into it. So James Bond is on another mission once again, and this time he's posing as a diamond smuggler, trying to find out who's the responsible for the killings of a few diamond smugglers in Africa. And of course Spectre's involved, and they've got a laser satellite weapon that can destabilize the world. And of course James Bond's on a mission to stop them before they can destabilize the world and potentially start a war with their powerful laser weapon. And he falls in love with a woman named Tiffany Case, who may or may not be a double agent. And without giving away too much, that's the story of the film in a nutshell. Alright, Diamonds Are Forever. It's a good movie. However, it's not my favorite James Bond movie. But it has its moments. I like some of the action sequences. I like the circus sequence when they were in Las Vegas. I thought that scene was really cool. And I don't know, the plot was a little predictable. But I will say the satellite weapon that Spectre had was pretty cool. Something like that would be terrifying if something like that were to exist. But I don't know, this one was just kind of weak. But it's not a bad movie or anything. It's definitely not one of my favorites in the series. But I do have to give it credit because this was the last James Bond movie to have Sean Connery as Bond, not counting Never Say Never Again. But I don't know. It's not to say I didn't like the movie, but it's not one of my favorites either. But it wasn't bad either. It did have some good action, but it's just the plot just wasn't the strongest either. But it wasn't bad. But I have to give it credit because this was the last James Bond movie to have Sean Connery, and then Roger Moore took his place. But overall, I don't have anything else to add. Diamonds Are Forever is not the worst James Bond movie. It's probably my least favorite out of the Sean Connery Bond movies, but it's not bad either. But it's not my favorite one in the series either. But we'll move on to the next one really quickly. But I'm giving Diamonds Are Forever a solid 7 out of 10, I guess. Not bad, not great, just fine, I guess. Anyways, moving on. Alright, just one more movie and then we're going to call it a day. And now we're finally getting into the Roger Moore era of James Bond, which, as of this video, Roger Moore is currently the actor who played James Bond the most. He played James Bond in a total of 7 movies from 1973 to 1985. And this is the one that started it all for Roger Moore. And that is Live and Let Die, which is the 8th film in the franchise. And this one again was directed by Guy Hamilton and was originally released on June 27th, 1973. And this one features probably the most famous James Bond movie theme song, which was Live and Let Die by Paul McCartney and the Wings. I can't play the song in this video because this video would get taken down for copyright, but I'm sure you've heard of the song. You might have heard it in the third Shrek movie, or American Hustle, or any other movie or TV show that may have used the song at one point. But yeah, so let's get right into it. So Live and Let Die has a Bond on another mission. He has to solve the mystery of who is responsible for the killing of 3 MI6 agents who were killed within less than 24 hours in 3 different parts of the world. One was killed in New York, the other was in Mississippi, and the other was in the Caribbean. And he's trying to solve a conspiracy involving the dictator of San Monique and a heroin kingpin in the United States. Or maybe it could be the same guy trying to secretly smuggle some heroin into the United States. And along the way, he's tries to rescue a woman known as Solitaire, who is into like those astrology cards and stuff like that. And there's like black magic and stuff. It's kind of a weird plot for this one, but it's interesting to say the least. And without giving away too much, that's the story of the film in a nutshell. This one, it's a little weird for a James Bond movie to have like elements of like black magic and stuff like that, and for James Bond to be facing off against a heroin kingpin at the same time. But it's interesting too. And this wouldn't be the first James Bond movie where he has to face off against a drug lord. I think he faces off against a drug lord in one of the 2 Timothy Dalton Bond movies that we'll talk about one day. But this one was pretty good. I really enjoyed this one, and this was a great start for Roger Moore as Bond. And the Roger Moore Bond movies are best known for some of their comedic moments in the franchise. And yeah, like the part when they were on the boat chase and they go through a wedding that was on the land. Bond misses the cake, but then when one of the villains is chasing Bond, the boat hits the cake and it leaves the bride in tears. I thought that part was kind of funny. But I enjoyed this one. It's one of my favorite ones in the franchise as well. And it was really entertaining. And the villain, Dr. Kananga, was an interesting villain. And I overall really enjoyed this one. I know I'm not really saying a whole lot, but I had fun with this one. And I think Roger Moore was a great actor who played Bond too, and he was a good choice for playing Bond within the next 7 Bond films. I mean, the next 6 Bond films that came out after this one. But I had some fun with this one. And I like the scene with the, I think it was like some sort of a scarecrow or whatever that secretly had like a camera on its eyes and it shot a gun or something out of its mouth. That part was pretty cool. But this was a really fun movie. I think this one was better than Diamonds Are Forever in my opinion. But all in all, it's a pretty fun James Bond movie, and it's one of my favorites in the franchise. Maybe one day I'll do my top 10 favorite James Bond movies. Who knows? But anyways, I don't really have a lot to say, but I'm giving Live and Let Die a 7.5 out of 10. Alright guys, that's going to be it for part 2. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, leave a comment below, subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and share the video with your friends. And if you haven't seen part 1, I'll leave the link to that in the description down below. And part 3 will be coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. But anyways, in the meantime, until next time, this is Keagan Shepherd signing off. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And yeah, take care, everybody. Peace out. Bye-bye. Alright, so I've finally covered all the James Bond movies from the 1960s. Now we move on to the 70s, starting with Diamonds Are Forever, which was directed by Guy Hamilton, who also directed Goldfinger. And this one was released on December 17th, 1971. And this one would see the return of Sean Connery, who would play James Bond for the last time, Or, unless you count Never Say Never Again as the final James Bond movie with Sean Connery, this is technically the last. Hey, buddy. It's Leon.